Poland is watching. We haven't spoken in 3 days and haven't stretched out in 2. And that's 44 hours we've been braced back to back, holding our tent poles, one hand low and the other high, to keep them from snapping in the wind. They're supposed to be titanium, but at Camp 3 they went off like rifle shots in the night, and these are jerry-rigged spares. The winds are topping 130 kilometers an hour. The temperature has dropped to 49 below. We're wearing 3 layers of fleece, 1 of Gore-Tex, down bodysuits, insulated climbing shells, and even our overgaiters with gloves, inside mittens, and head caps inside balaclavas, inside hoods. I've been unable to interrupt the clatter of my teeth. Jacek's breathing sounds like someone blowing bubbles through a straw. Bienek has long since given himself over to a kind of stupefaction. We store the radio batteries in our underwear and load them only when we need to call base camp. It takes 10 minutes to get them back in through all the layers once we're finished. Then we just grip one another and hold on until our testicles warm the battery casings. The casings conduct the cold with exceptional efficiency. We're at Camp 4 and only 1,000 meters below the summit, but the summit is 8,126 meters high. And in the winter, that means that everything at this altitude is sandblasted by the jet stream and the cold. Because of that, the peak is called Nanga Parbat, Sanskrit for naked mountain. When it's not storming, the sky sounds like a giant is flapping bed sheets as hard as he can. When it is, the turbine sound of the howl makes even shouting pointless. During those periods, we're reduced to hand signals with mittens. We've been on the mountain for 27 days. Our sponsors have shelled out big money, not for attempts, but for results. Our team members, strung out along the various camps below, are spent. Our wives, back home, are miserable. Our children are frightened. Poland is watching. If we descend, we won't have the physical reserves to return. If we continue upward, we'll be ascending without being able to make out our hands at arm's length. If we decide to wait it out, they'll find us once the storm's over. Like everything else in the tent, from our sunscreen to our cameras, frozen solid and cascaded with frost. This mountain is a widowmaker in the summer, when the weather's as good as it gets. It's famous for the kind of ice and rock slides that in 1841 were big enough to dam the Indus sitting at its feet. The first great mountaineer to set foot up here, the Englishman A.F. Mummery, along with his entire expedition, was never heard from again. 26 climbers were killed before even the first summer summit was achieved. There have been 12 winter attempts since. None have succeeded. There's a song we sing in bars. Who does winter mountaineering? We do winter mountaineering. We are the Poles. The first winter attempt here was a joint Anglo-Polish expedition in 1988. Then the Brits came to their senses and dropped out. The Italians partnered with us for a little while as well and had the casualties to prove it. Only the Poles have persevered. Attempt number 13 is in deep trouble. For the last 3 days, we've been hunkered down in an air raid of wind. Camp 4 is a small trench for a tent, chopped into a cornice of snow as hard as concrete. It's now the 7th, and we need to be back in base camp by the middle of the month, after which, as Kolzniak likes to put it, the winds really get going. Kolzniak got started like the rest of us, as a schoolboy, running around local crags and picking up whatever he could in terms of technique here and there. Afternoon larks turned into weekend excursions and then long holidays away from home. Now he's so famous that kids can buy a Snakes and Ladders board game of his K2 climb. He's one of the central figures in the golden decade of Polish Himalayan mountaineering, having summited 10 8,000-meter peaks, including Everest twice. Once everyone and his brother started climbing such peaks, he began to proselytize for what he called a true alpine style, which involved refusing to benefit from the work of other teams, even if it meant ignoring fixed ropes that lay beside your route or declining to take shelter in unused tents. On Gasherbrum 4, he forbade his team from following a Japanese expedition's footsteps in the deep snow. It was a short transition from that to winter mountaineering. Soviet restrictions on travel throughout the post-war period ensured that the Poles missed out on the first descents of all the highest peaks, leaving us with mountains so small they lacked even year-round snow. But we solved the problem by resorting to the unthinkable, climbing in winter. In 1959, Zavada electrified everyone by ascending a staggering number of connected peaks in 19 days of continuous climbing. Kolzniak, still a boy then, snuck into one of his lectures in a packed 5,000-seat auditorium, and Zavada displayed a slide of a towering rock face in a sleet storm and told the audience, "Show me how you climb in this, and I'll tell you what you're worth." It was Zavada who first conceived of attempting Everest in winter. Once travel restrictions were lifted, and Zavada, who led the expedition that succeeded. He lived to see Lhotse and Annapurna and Dhaulagiri fall as well. By then, the world was calling us the Ice Warriors, and the Pope was sending him climbing advice. Industries hired top climbers during the summer to paint their smokestacks. Easy work that paid like state ministries. And Nanga Parbat remained the reef on which all Polish shipping ran aground. In 1997, Pankowice and Trzymiel clawed to within 300 meters of the top before their frostbite became so dire they could no longer press on. Duskowitz in 2008 reached through a blizzard what he thought was the summit, only to find once back in base camp that he had stopped to celebrate on a rise 80 meters lower. And now here we are. For 3 years, each of us has hoarded and sacrificed and trained for the right to earn this chance. We have flown 5,000 kilometers and caravaned by truck and foot hundreds of kilometers more and ascended 7,000 meters in altitude and squandered tens of thousands euros on permits and porter's fees and equipment. "Let's go, girls," Kolzniak has shouted whenever anything has gone wrong. "You're not going to grow the balls you need sitting around complaining." And as Agnieszka never tires of pointing out, we're not the only ones who have sacrificed. Her father, on the occasion of our daughter's 7th birthday, sat me down and walked us both glumly through the state of my finances. And once he'd finished, her mother, waiting beside him, then asked how on earth, if I loved her daughter and granddaughter as much as I claimed, I could justify what I was doing. In the other room, Agnieszka made a loud snorting sound. I answered that I didn't justify what I was doing. 9 expeditions in the course of a 7-year marriage meant that I'd been away more than at home. For 5 consecutive years, I'd missed my daughter's birthday. This birthday I'd been able to make because our climbing permits had fallen through. And each time I returned with a body so devastated it never fully restored itself. Agnieszka told her girlfriends that she called my first weeks back the famine zombie weeks. My vertebrae and hip bones were anatomy lessons. I was able to focus on emotional issues only when she put a hand on each side of my face and redirected my gaze into her eyes. At our airport reunions, after her relief and joy, I'd see her anger at what I'd done to myself flood through her like a third revelation.